Hi, I'm Rowena. My sister spent 7 years trying to erase me from our family, and it almost worked. Until her fiancé looked me dead in the eye, in front of 120 guests, and said, "Your Honor." That moment cracked open everything they tried to bury: my name, my legacy, my voice. But why would a family go this far to silence one of their own? Have you ever felt like someone you loved turned you into a villain just to protect their own story? What's the most shocking thing a sibling ever did to you? What time are you listening to this? And where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I really want to know. I hadn't stepped foot in Charleston in nearly 5 years. Yet here I was, walking into the floral-laden reception room of the Calhoun mansion like I belonged, when every fiber in my body screamed I didn't. My heels clicked a little too loud on the marble, and my breath caught in my throat as eyes turned and quickly turned away. I found my mother first, Lucille, perfectly preserved in a lavender sheath dress, her lips thin and immobile as she blinked at me like I'd resurrected from the grave. Then there was Trent, my baby brother, her golden boy. His expression didn't waver, just narrowed into something between annoyance and disdain. "Eliza's been dying to meet you," Lucille said flatly, her southern charm sanded down to the bone. "Eliza?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. "My fiancé," Trent chimed in, stepping in front of her like he was shielding her from a rabid dog. "She's been reading your cases." Before I could even process that, a woman swept toward me in a sea of white satin and curls. "Rowena? I'm Eliza. Oh my God, I am such a fan of yours." Her hand grasped mine with a warmth that felt almost cruel. "Judge Tate, right? Your decision in Samuels vs. Hartford? That changed my life. You have no idea." I blinked. Once. Twice. She didn't know. She had no idea who I was to Trent, to this family. I was just the name on her favorite appellate decision. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Trent's jaw was tight. He leaned over, voice a hiss. "Do not ruin this evening." "I haven't even opened my mouth," I muttered back, lips barely moving. We found our seats, Eliza bubbling beside me, unaware she was floating over a pit of landmines. I sipped my water, eyes flicking to the mirrored ceiling that reflected back a woman I barely recognized. Tight smile, watchful eyes, sharp cheekbones hardened by the years. Eliza leaned in again. "I actually prepared something, a little tribute. Nothing big, just a short speech. I hope that's okay." I stared at her. "A tribute?" I echoed, trying to keep the steel out of my voice. "To Judge Tate," she beamed. "You've inspired me in so many ways. I even printed it out. I'm giving it to the MC." I watched as she handed the folded paper to the coordinator, her cheeks pink with pride. But the moment the woman turned, Trent intercepted. I saw the flick of his hand, the way his face dropped when his eyes caught the title at the top of the page, "In honor of Judge Rowena Tate." His smile snapped on like a light switch. "Thank you, Eliza," he said smoothly, folding the paper and tucking it into his jacket. "We'll make sure it gets read at the right time." She beamed. He turned to me. "Let it go," he whispered like a threat. I looked away. 16 years ago, I sat in a cramped DC office, my palms sweating through a Senate hearing. They told me the votes were there, that I would be nominated. Then, out of nowhere, allegations, psychiatric reports, whispers about emotional instability. My nomination evaporated overnight. No one could tell me where the opposition came from. Until now. I kept my face neutral, the mask I wore in court. But something was shifting beneath. Eliza's innocent admiration, Trent's panic, it cracked open something I had long buried under professional detachment. I didn't get up and leave. I stayed. Dinner passed in awkward bursts, salads untouched, laughter brittle. Trent avoided looking at me. Lucille barely said a word. "Eliza?" She floated, blissfully unaware, pausing now and then to steal glances at her future husband with soft eyes. I wondered how long that would last. Near the end, as wine glasses clinked and polite toasts were exchanged, I noticed Eliza whisper something to the event planner. The woman nodded and disappeared. Moments later she returned, holding the tribute speech, not in Trent's hands this time. I followed her movement as she passed behind me. I didn't turn my head. I didn't breathe. Trent noticed too. His eyes snapped to me, furious, afraid. They want silence, I thought. I took another sip of my wine, slow and deliberate. I'll give them a memory instead. I didn't sleep. The pillows smelled like bleach and regret. I stared at the ceiling of the hotel room, watching dawn inch across the crown molding while my mind looped like a courtroom transcript. Every smug curl of Trent's mouth, every innocent word Eliza had poured into that tribute speech, every lie I swallowed for the sake of civility. 16 years ago, I walked into that Senate subcommittee hearing with a spine made of steel. I left with rubber knees and no explanation. There are concerns, they'd said, unverified red flags. And that was that. My future evaporated under the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights and veiled insinuations. I kept waiting for an answer that never came. Maybe they thought I'd vanish. Instead, I began digging. By mid-morning, I was hunched over my laptop, nursing a bitter coffee as I scoured a folder I hadn't opened in years, labeled simply, Nomination. Deep within were saved emails, PDFs, random notes I'd clung to like breadcrumbs from a past I had tried to bury. One caught my eye, an anonymous memo from the nomination period, marked urgent, emotional volatility, conflicting judicial loyalties, unfit temperament. I remembered that phrase like a scar, unfit temperament. My hands moved on their own, checking the metadata. Source device, upload path, partial signature code. The original file came from a private device registered to Trent's college account. My stomach dropped. Not a metaphorical drop, a real one, like a trapdoor beneath my ribs had been yanked open. He hadn't just passively watched me fall. He pushed. I kept going. There was a woman I hadn't spoken to in years, Anita Gray. She'd been a quiet presence during law school, now a records clerk for a federal committee. I called her. She didn't recognize my voice at first. When she did, there was a pause. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. Did someone file psychiatric concerns under my name back then? Another silence. Then, Rowena, I'm not sure I'm allowed to... Was it fabricated? Her breath caught. She wasn't a liar. She wasn't a fighter either. Yes, she whispered. The file described me as erratic, judgmentally compromised, overwhelmed by emotion. Ironic, really. Who submitted it? I asked. A request was logged under committee authorization, she said, but the actual file came from a consultant, Paul Lancer. I remembered Paul, frat boy arrogance in pressed suits, a former classmate of Trent's. They once got drunk together and tried to prank call my chambers. I'd hung up on them. Of course it was him. I ended the call and stared at the screen. The words blurred, but I saw the shape of them. A brother's betrayal, sealed in government ink. I could have screamed. Instead, I copied the files, encrypted them, and sent them to my attorney with a simple subject line. Pending retaliation. He'd taken my career. Not just ignored it. No, that would have been too easy. He'd annihilated it from the inside out. And then he smiled at me across a dinner table like I was an embarrassing relic. I opened a blank document, not for a toast, for testimony. Halfway through outlining it, my phone buzzed. A message from Trent. Don't do anything stupid, sis. You never had what it takes anyway. I stared at it for a long moment, pulse steady. Then I hit delete. I walked over to the dresser and picked up the framed article from when I'd been shortlisted for the federal bench. The glass was cracked down the corner, airport baggage carelessness, but I'd kept it anyway. I'm done playing fair, I said aloud, to no one but the mirror. The gravel crunched beneath my heels as I stepped toward the gate, the summer sun already curling the air above the garden path. The sign at the entrance shimmered gold. Eliza and Trent's rehearsal celebration. I offered my name at the check-in table. A pause. The woman frowned at her list. I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not listed. I blinked. Try again. Rowena Tate. She scanned the clipboard. Do you have a physical invite? I hesitated. It was tucked in the side pocket of my purse, the ivory envelope with my mother's delicate cursive. I handed it over. "That's not one of the official prints," she said quietly, glancing toward a coordinator in a headset. "Let me double-check." So I stood there, fully dressed, fully exposed. Guests filtered past me with champagne flutes, their eyes flickering once, twice, and moving on. Not one familiar face paused. Weeks ago, when that envelope slid through my mail slot, I'd stood frozen, my thumb resting on the embossed R. It had been so long since anything from Lucille arrived without venom. Hope has a sixth sense of humor. So does family. Eventually, the gate opened. The staffer apologized, but the tension had already settled like pollen on my skin. I drifted through manicured hedges and delicate music, every step both rehearsed and misplaced. Then I heard my name. "Rowena?" It was Eliza. She looked surprised, but not displeased. More startled. I smiled, nodded, and before I could reply, someone else caught my eye. Lucille, standing beneath a trellis, already halfway turned away. Later, during a lull, I overheard the tail end of a hushed exchange between Lucille and a cousin. I only asked her, quietly. It wasn't for everyone to know. "Wait, you invited her?" The cousin's voice rose. Lucille glanced around. "Don't be ridiculous. I don't even know why she's here." I felt something inside me fold in half. The truth was cruel, but the lie was precision cut. She'd asked me, whispered across that pale card something that resembled an olive branch. But now that it didn't serve her narrative, she was retracting it, rewriting the timeline like I was a rogue actor who wandered on stage uninvited. Then came the accident. They were rehearsing speeches by the sound booth. A tech assistant was syncing mics when a sharp crackle interrupted the air, followed by a voice. "Rowena, I miss you, I do. I don't even know how to say this anymore without sounding like a coward. But I'm sorry. For all of it." Lucille's voice. I froze. Everyone did. The voicemail rolled on, stammered with half-choked guilt. "Please come. I don't know if I deserve to ask, but I need to try." The room held its breath. Eliza stood, petrified. Trent's face darkened to the color of dry brick. Someone shut off the feed. A beat. Then polite murmuring resumed, like the air hadn't just been split open. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply lifted my glass and gave the crowd the smallest of nods. "Well," I said, "that was unexpected." And I left. Not in a storm of heels or slamming doors. I thanked the coordinator, stepped outside, and let the heat sting my cheeks until the numbness caught up. Back in the car, I gripped the steering wheel like it might keep me grounded. I should have been used to it by now. The rewrites, the deletions, the gaslighting polished with southern grace. But pain doesn't numb with repetition. It just deepens. My phone buzzed. A message from Eliza. I didn't know. I swear. I let the screen go dark. 7 years of silence. And now everyone's pretending they didn't hear it. I arrived late on purpose. By the time I walked into the banquet hall, the lights were dimmed to a dusky gold, and every seat had been taken. 120 guests, dressed in tailored formality, turned in near unison as the door whispered shut behind me. My heels echoed across the wood floor like an accusation. I didn't flinch. Trent's jaw visibly tensed. Lucille's lips curled in polite disgust. They hadn't expected me to show. Again. Too bad. Eliza, standing at the front with a mic in hand, beamed like I was right on cue. "Before we begin," she said brightly, "I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone very special in the room tonight." I paused near the back. My breath caught mid-step. She's the woman who shaped the way I think about justice, about advocacy, about what one voice can mean. Some in the room exchanged curious glances. A few looked toward me and then away again. I only learned recently that she's my future sister-in-law, but long before that, I admired her from afar. Judge Rowena Tate gasps, audible, real. Eliza turned toward me with a smile full of admiration, completely unaware of the landmine she'd just stepped on. The silence cracked like glass, and then, quite literally, it did. Trent's wine glass dropped from his hand, shattering on the floor with a sharp, clean sting. No one moved. Lucille blinked slowly, as if deciding whether to disown her daughter in front of this entire room. I gave the smallest nod. Every eye was on me. But it wasn't awe I felt. It was a strange, cold reckoning. Then came the whispers. Wait, that's the judge who... Didn't she lose her nomination? I thought there were... issues. It started with a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. She leaned in close and whispered like she was sharing a secret only I could confirm. They said you were unstable. 16 years ago, I'd stared at my inbox as email after email poured in. Anonymous accusations, doctored transcripts, clipped photos from courtrooms taken without consent. The smear campaign had been vicious, surgical, and all of it had been orchestrated by my brother. Now I saw it land in real time, guests reacting not just to my presence but to the mythology Trent had spun around me, and yet none of them had ever asked me a single question. Then, from across the room, a cane tapped once on the floor. Judge Marianne Kessler, retired, revered, and once my fiercest mentor. She stood slowly and turned to face the crowd. "It's time someone corrected the record," she said. Her voice was steady, iron-wrapped velvet. "Rowena Tate is not only innocent, she's the reason I remained on the bench as long as I did. When others looked away, she stood firm. When the system tried to silence her, she answered with rulings that saved lives." The room rippled. Somewhere near the front, someone began to clap. Others joined. Not everyone, but enough. Trent bolted. I didn't even see where he went. I stayed still. Not because I didn't want to leave, but because I wanted them all to remember this. This exact frame, the moment the mask cracked. Later, I stepped into the garden for air. The smell of lilac and lemon sorbet clung to the warm dusk. Eliza followed. She looked pale beneath the fairy lights. I didn't know about any of it. I turned slowly. "But you knew who I was, and you knew he hated me." She opened her mouth, closed it again. "I didn't think he'd go that far." "They always do," I said, brushing past her. As I reached the gate, my phone buzzed. A message preview lit up the screen. Charleston Herald. "Judge Tate, do you have time for comment?" The night after the toast, I lay in bed with my phone screen dimmed, scrolling through old photos I didn't remember taking, and others I remembered too well, only to find myself missing from them. Cropped out at Eliza's graduation, replaced with a centerpiece in the family holiday newsletter. It wasn't an oversight. It had been deliberate all along. Morning sunlight pooled at the edges of the blinds, warm and mocking. I didn't sleep. I just waited until Cameron texted, "Walk?" I typed yes before I let myself question why I still needed her voice when mine was shaking. We met at her usual coffee spot, then wandered through her neighborhood like we had back in college. Two women quietly outrunning the gravity of things we couldn't fix. She didn't ask about last night. She just handed me a mug to keep my hands warm. "They did a number on you," she said finally. "More than I realized." She hesitated. "You remember the pendant, right? The one your dad gave you after you passed the bar?" I stopped walking. "The Lady Justice one," she clarified, like I needed the reminder. "The one you wore everywhere until... well, until you didn't." I nodded once. "Lucille told me it went missing when they cleaned the estate." Cameron looked down at the sidewalk, jaw working. "I found it," she said. "Last spring. I didn't tell you because I didn't know if you'd want to see it." I turned to her sharply. She gestured for me to follow and led me to her garage. It smelled of cedar and forgotten summer projects. In the far corner, buried behind a stack of broken wreaths and dusty dishware, was a cardboard box. She slid it toward me, marked in thick black ink. "Trash. Donate." Inside, beneath a chipped snow globe and a baby photo album that wasn't mine, was the pendant. It looked smaller than I remembered. The chain tangled, the figure of Lady Justice slightly dulled, but unmistakably mine. Cameron didn't speak. I held it in my palm, thumb brushing the scales, and the world felt eerily still, the kind of stillness just before a dam gives way. "They didn't lose me," I said softly. "They buried me. They tried to make sure no one remembered I'd ever mattered." Cameron exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding the air for years. That Sunday, I wore the pendant to brunch. It wasn't an announcement. It was an assertion. It hung neatly just below my collarbone, polished to a quiet gleam. Lucille noticed the moment I stepped in. She froze mid-sip, then set her glass down just a little too gently. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers twitched. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. I spoke with my fork, with my calm, with every bite I took under her narrowing gaze. And when she asked me to pass the jam, I did, with the same hand that wore the necklace. It was the loudest silence we'd ever shared. Just before I left, I noticed the engagement brochure left open on the hallway table. Family history section. Neatly captioned photos of generations past, everyone but me. No Rowena, no federal clerkship, no mention of the judge they tried so hard to forget. I smiled, just barely. Slipping the pendant back under my collar, I whispered, "Then I'll write my own legacy." That night, I opened my laptop, titled a document, "My Statement," and moved it into a locked folder named Restoration. Lucille didn't say a word about the pendant, but her silence was loud. Her eyes had found it, lingered too long, then darted away like the truth burned. That moment stayed with me longer than her voice ever had. The next day, I waited for Eliza at the little downtown cafe we'd agreed on. She never showed. 30 minutes passed. Then a message popped up, dry and impersonal. "Can't make lunch. Sorry." No reason, no reschedule, just a door quietly shutting in my face. Something had shifted again. Later that afternoon, Cameron called me, her voice tight with urgency. "Check your inbox. I'm forwarding something I wasn't supposed to see." It was a screen recording, blurry, recorded from a phone tilted sideways, a snippet of a group chat video among Eliza's bridal party. I recognized the manicured laughter of her friend Bree. Then another girl chimed in. "It's all optics. The family wanted a clean PR boost. Judge Fiancé looks amazing for Trent." Then came Eliza's voice, slurred but heartbreakingly clear. "They don't care if I love him. They care how we look in press photos. I'm not marrying for love. I'm marrying into the narrative." I closed my laptop and sat very still. They used her too. Cameron wasn't done. Minutes later, she sent another file, this one anonymous. An internal email from Trent's father, sent nearly 6 months before the proposal. Eliza's clean background and Judge Tate's fall from grace. Together, it's the perfect redemption arc. Lock it in before November. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My name had been reduced to a shadow, a strategic asset in a campaign I was never asked to join. They wrote a story with my blood and sold it as inspiration. The next morning, I sent Eliza another lunch invitation. She accepted. We met in the conservatory of the Wentworth Hotel, sunlight streaming through glass panels, delicate cutlery clinking in the background. "Eliza," I began, my voice calm, "you deserve to know when you've been cast in someone else's story." She blinked, confused. "I'm not here to accuse you," I said. "Just to say, be careful who's writing your future." Something hardened in her jaw. "Is this about Trent again?" "It's about power, control, the version of love that doesn't ask you what you want." She pushed her plate away. "You think I'm too stupid to know what I'm doing?" "I think you're smart enough to pretend you don't." Eliza stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. "You've made your point. I don't need saving." "No," I said as I rose too. "You need the truth. But not everyone's ready for it." She didn't respond. She just walked away, leaving her coffee half full and her future wide open. That evening, I sat at my desk, heart still rattling from the wreckage of that meeting. I clicked open my encrypted folder and renamed a document. Plan B became Stage 1. I stared at the name for a moment, then made the call. "Charleston Ledger," a familiar voice answered. I hadn't heard it in years. Brielle? I asked. There was a pause. Then, soft recognition. Rowena? I heard you're still chasing legacy corruption cases. She laughed, skeptical. Why? You got one for me? I smiled without smiling. Number, I've got something better. It's personal. It started with a name I hadn't heard in over a decade. Harold Givens, the estate attorney I interned for during law school. He called out of nowhere, voice still clipped and direct as ever. Rowena, I was reviewing Lucian Tate's estate filings. Something doesn't add up. Thought you should see it. He emailed the scanned will that afternoon. My stomach dropped the second I opened it. It looked official, filed, notarized, signed. But not by me. My name had been replaced with a jittery scrawl, a signature that barely resembled mine. The kind a child would forge on a report card. I called him back, breath shallow. What is this? The signature's bad, he said. And the witness listed. She lost her license years ago. It's shaky at best, but it's been filed with the probate court. I scrolled back through the document, fingers trembling. Everything I was meant to inherit, gone. My share, my legal rights, wiped away. And the date? It coincided with the exact year I cut contact with Trent and Lucille. They hadn't just rejected me, they'd erased me. Cameron didn't need prompting. She was already steps ahead, digging. I found the witness, she told me the next morning. She lives in Somerville, still answers her landline. Within hours, we were sitting in the woman's modest living room, surrounded by porcelain angels and faded doilies. Her hands shook as she poured tea. I remember the paper, she whispered. Lucille said it was just a correction, nothing important. She seemed so sure. I didn't question her. I said nothing, just let the silence stretch. But now, she added, eyes welling, knowing it hurt you, I never would have... Cameron slid the affidavit across the table. You don't have to say anything more. Just sign. For yourself. She did. By that evening, I had legal ammunition in my hands, cold, clear, and damning. I called Judge Reed, the woman who stood for me when no one else would. They forged it, I told her. She didn't gasp or flinch, just said, good. Then you have them right where they think they buried you. She gave me only one instruction. Don't speak. Don't warn. Let them move. Then end it. So I did. I spent the next 48 hours compiling everything. Scans, dates, affidavits. I emailed reporters who once ghosted me, lawyers who once doubted me. This time I didn't ask for their approval. I gave them a countdown, and then I walked into the Tate estate. It was a last-minute family gathering. Trent had called it under the guise of reconnecting, but I could feel the dread when I entered the foyer. The tension clung to the air like humidity. Lucille stood near the fireplace, brittle smile affixed. Trent leaned against the mahogany sideboard, trying to look casual. I said nothing at first, just walked to the center table where the old portrait of my father loomed like a judgment. I was taken out of the will, I said, calm as glass. But not out of the record. I placed the envelope on the table. Cream-colored, sealed in red wax. Trent's smile faltered. What is that? Open it before the lawyers do, I said. Or don't. It won't change what happens next. And I turned my back to them, for the first time in years, on my terms. I was brushing my teeth when the text came through. Jonah's name flashed across the screen, followed by 5 words that made my stomach drop. You deserve to be seen. He included a link. No explanation. Just a timestamp and a file name. Thanksgiving /2017.mp4. I didn't want to open it. But I did. It started with laughter, glasses clinking, the hum of a family dinner. Then Trent's voice rose over the table, slurred and sharp. You know what's funny? Some people spend their whole lives pretending to be someone they'll never be. Someone chuckled. Someone shifted awkwardly. He raised his glass toward me. To Judge Rowena Tate, the title she'll never have. And I just sat there, staring straight ahead. No reply, no defense, just silence. And now, I watched myself take the blow again, my jaw set, eyes steady. A younger version of me who still believed silence was a form of strength. Jonah had recorded it on his phone years ago and buried it out of fear. But now, he sent it into the world. By noon, the clip had over 200,000 views. By dinner, it was trending. Thanksgiving truth. She was right. And my inbox? Overflowing with apologies from strangers, invitations from reporters, and a handful of lawyers asking if I needed representation. Funny how quickly silence becomes power when the whole world hears it. Trent tried to claim the video was edited, but the footage was clean, raw, unforgiving. Then came the podcast. Jonah, his voice shaking but determined, told the world what he hadn't told me in person. Trent threatened to ruin my scholarship if I didn't keep quiet. I stayed silent. But Rowena, she stood up for me when no one else did, and I let her face it alone. He broke down during the interview. The host, caught off guard, let the moment breathe. I listened from my kitchen, phone resting beside a half-empty coffee mug. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just closed my eyes and listened to the boy I once defended finally return the favor. Lucille called the next morning. "I didn't know it would become this big," she whispered, voice brittle with panic. "It always was," I said. "You just didn't look close enough." Trent's PR firm pulled their contract by midday. Sponsors disappeared overnight. His name now trailed headlines, like a warning label. At brunch, no one spoke. Even the clatter of forks against china seemed forced. Lucille stared at the pendant around my neck, the one she once buried beneath a stack of broken ornaments, and looked away. I walked the park that evening, coat wrapped tight, wind threading through the amber leaves. Families passed me, laughing, shouting, running in chaotic joy I didn't envy, but respected. My phone buzzed again. Judge Tate's redemption, the woman behind the viral moment speaks out tomorrow. I stared at the headline, not for long. Then I closed the screen and slid the phone into my pocket. Let them hear it from me this time. Let's finish what they started. The light poured through the blinds, pale and quiet. I didn't reach for my phone. It had buzzed half a dozen times already, blinking with news alerts, missed calls, interview requests, voices from a world suddenly remembering my name. But I just stared at my reflection in the mirror across the room, eyes swollen with exhaustion. "It's over," I whispered. "But it's not done." A knock came around noon. Software hesitant. I knew before opening the door. It was Eliza. She looked smaller than before. Her eyes red-rimmed, her shoulders curved inward. She didn't speak until I stepped aside. "I shouldn't be here," she began, voice breaking. But I needed to say something without cameras, without him. I poured her tea. Neither of us touched it. "I let him shape me," she said. "I wanted so badly to belong. I didn't care who it erased." There were tears, and silence, and finally, truth. She unraveled the lies. How Trent coached her, how Lucille rewrote stories, how the engagement was less love and more legacy. "You didn't deserve any of this," she said. "I know," I replied. "I'm sorry. I know that too." I didn't say, "I forgive you." Not exactly. But I placed my hand over hers. We sat like that for a while. When she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. "I hope this isn't goodbye." "Maybe not," I said. "But it's an ending." Later that evening, I scrolled past Trent's public statement, a pitiful attempt at damage control, blaming cancel culture and claiming victimhood. The firm distanced itself. Auditors were crawling through their records. Lucille vanished. I hadn't seen her in days. Then came the envelope. No return address, only her handwriting. 5 words. "I see it now. Forgive me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I burned the letter, not in hatred, but in stillness. I watched the edges curl, blacken, and fall into ash." A week passed. Then came the symposium. It was a small room. No flashing lights, no press crews, just law students, professors, a few seasoned attorneys. I stood behind the podium, heart steady, words unshaking. What we survive becomes our story, I told them. What we do after, it becomes our power. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. At the end, a student stood, young, nervous. How did you survive the silence? I met her eyes. By learning it was never mine to carry. Applause rose slowly, soft at first, then solid. I stepped off the stage feeling lighter than I had in years. Later that night, I walked the Charleston waterfront, coat pulled tight against the breeze. The harbor was dark and endless, the kind of silence that didn't bruise. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice, sharp, calm. "This isn't over, Judge Tate. You've made enemies." I looked out over the water, the wind brushing hair from my face. I didn't flinch. "Then let them come." In the end, I didn't just reclaim a title. I reclaimed myself. For years, I stayed silent, thinking dignity meant staying quiet. But silence doesn't protect truth. It buries it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Your voice matters, even if it shakes. Especially if it shakes. No family, no legacy, no lie is worth your peace. And if someone ever tries to erase your name, write it louder. What about you? Have you ever felt like you were pushed aside by the very people meant to protect you? What would you do if your silence became someone else's power? If this story spoke to you, leave a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't, let me know why. Your truth matters too. If you found value here, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what comes next. Your journey matters. Let's walk it together.